So probably everybody's heard the Enlightenment is like this treasure that you don't know you have metaphor. And I decided to sort of revise that one. So when I was a kid, I did this, and maybe you did too, because it's really fun. But it's like a kid. Enlightenment is like a kid who gets bored one day, and so he decides to go out in the sand pile and bury one of his absolute favorite toys. And he like sort of makes himself forget about it. So he keeps thinking of it and keeps thinking about digging it up. But what he wants is he wants to sort of like forget about the toy, so the toy is really exciting for him to find at a later date. So he forgets about it. And so he really eventually forgets about it. And a few months later, he ends up getting really bored and has nothing to do. And then he sort of like just kind of quiets his mind, and all of a sudden, he gets this memory that he has this toy out there waiting for him to find. So he's really excited. He's just like lights up, and he goes out and he digs a whole bunch of holes, but he can't find the toy. He runs out of daylight, and his mom calls him in for supper. And he has to leave, and so he's kind of dejected. And then a couple days later, he goes back out. He gets his motivation back to search for it again. And he finally finds the toy. And he is really happy about it. And now he's like gone through all this work. And when he finally finds it, it's just this incredibly joyous event. He's thrilled and he's happy to see it again and happy to play with it again. So most of us think that the toy is enlightenment, but it's way more wonderful than that. Enlightenment is the shovel, the sand pile, the sky, the kids, the mother calling the kid in for dinner, the boredom, the awareness of the entire story. The entire story. There is no toy, there is no treasure. And so, always, like when we try to think enlightenment is something to find, we think that enlightenment is the toy, when really it's way more wonderful than that. And when you go back to your direct experience, that's always like the key, where it's way more wonderful than that. But honestly, sometimes it does feel like we're putting in a ton of effort in like this faith that we're going to get this kind of expansion. So I thought of this real life example that I attracted into my experience in the past. And a few years ago, me and my husband completely renovated the upstairs and the living room and like a good portion of our house. And so we bought this house knowing that we were going to renovate it, but being like in our early 20s, not realizing how much work it would be. So we, with like help of my father and some other people, we renovated like the main living areas, the kitchen and the bathroom was already renovated by the previous people who owned the house. And so we had like the basics, but we found ourselves with 2 kids and a dog and not having like bedrooms for everybody. And so all of a sudden we realized that we had to like hire out all this work and just get it done all of a sudden. So we found ourselves in the middle of the winter. We found this guy who at the time, like in the dead of winter, didn't have any work, and which was a rare thing for him, and so it like worked out perfectly. So we had to live with the kids in like the kitchen and the dining room together, all together, and it was absolutely crazy because we couldn't get outside either. It was the middle of winter. And so the first day they started work on the house, we had told them not to knock down these specific walls and cut through these specific beams because we were really concerned about the structural integrity of the house. And this guy did not listen to us at all. I guess he thought it would save more time to just go ahead and do it and apologize later than it would to try to convince us or try to like work around these walls that really didn't actually have to be there. So I'll never forget the feeling of coming upstairs and seeing nothing, like one seamless room. And it was horrifying, honestly. It was so startling and surprising, and to realize that somebody had just gone and done what they wanted to, and this was the first day of the project. It was pretty horrifying. But in the end, it ended up being way more amazing. I got like the master bedroom that I never dared dream of. I got like master bathroom. And like taking all these walls out gave us so many opportunities that we never knew, never imagined were there. And it's like this with enlightenment. It's the perfect analogy, because we have like we start to go for this project and we think it's going to be so much better, and it is, but we never really imagine quite the potential that's there, and it can be terrifying at first. And at the same time, like, you live for a little while, you inconvenience yourself. And even when the project is finished, you have kids that you have to train to sleep in their own rooms, who are accustomed to sleeping near mom. And you have like this whole different route to get to the bathroom in the middle of the night, and you stub your toe a lot. And in that moment when you stub your toe and you're like, oh crap, the floor is unlevel and we had to make this thing and we should have never done this and should have never bought this house and should have never. That's the same thing we do. But a week later, your brain recognizes that step up and you'll never stub your toe on it again. And you have to allow yourself that time to like make adjustments that you've thrown your entire routine off schedule in order for this expansion and for this dream, for this improvement. And you have to like forgive yourself when you do that, and kind of like align your thoughts and have a bigger vision. And in the walls, like our beliefs, and realizing that it can seem horrifying at first, but really the reality of it is that it's so much better than we can ever imagine. Just like it's not the toy, it's not the treasure, it's the entire story itself. There's not even an end game to it. It's not even having the entire renovation done. And now I so enjoy telling this story, even though it was years of living in a lot of discomfort. And so a couple days ago, I found myself in this like really low place, and I tried to meditate and that wasn't working. And part of the problem was that I felt so overwhelmed by my kids, by like creative projects I wanted to do, by the house, by the dog, by everything. And it was like everything that I tried to take on in that state just turned into like this further disaster that just like went out in so many directions and did not go how I wanted it to. And so eventually I decided to start journaling about it. But I hadn't journaled for a long time, and I really had some resistance to going into these feelings that I wished I wasn't having, to going into these places. And so I started out the journal entry with this joke that had just, because of some random incidents, came to mind in the morning and that I had thought of several times over the day. So it's a stupid joke, but it's been my favorite joke for a while. And my husband hates it because I always tell it, and I tell it awfully. I usually can't make it through without laughing. But anyway, so a pirate walks into a bar and he has a steering wheel attached to his pants. And the bartender says, "Hey, do you know there's a steering wheel on your pants?" And the pirate says, "Arr, it drives me nuts." So I write out this joke and I just start the journal entry, and like it's not, I just did it because it seemed like a fun thing to do. And then I went into all the craziness that was going on in my life at the time. And I decided to do the journal entry in a format that sometimes I write in. So I'll act as if I'm speaking to somebody else, and I'll try to connect with this like higher wisdom place, and at the same time I'll play the character of Mandy, who's like totally overwhelmed and just wants to rant and just say whatever she wants. So lately I've been having a ton of breakthroughs by looking up the root, the etymology of certain words, because I realized that we ourselves give words these crazy, awful feeling connotations that they never actually had. And so when I do this, I often get a bunch of insights in a bunch of different directions and really helpful ways to reframe words. So when I'm journaling and one of these words comes up, I'll look up the word roots of it. So a few entries ago, I looked up the word neglect, because when you have a ton of creative projects going on, and you have kids and a family and a house and all these things to juggle and manage, it feels like you're neglecting something all the time, or that's my habit of thought. So when I looked up the word neglect, it means literally not select. And yet I've added this huge weight of horrible connotations to it. And there's so many instances of words that we do this with. And so I said in the entry, like in my own voice, I'm like, this isn't gonna work anymore. Like I looked up that one in the past, the word came up, I'm like, etymology isn't gonna make me happy today. It's not gonna work this time. But I ended up looking up the word, like ranting about how this isn't fun. This experience isn't fun. Who thought this would be fun? So for some reason, this wiser part of me that I write in italicized font told me to look up the etymology of the word fun. And when I did, it was like a joke. It's like a trick. And then I remembered that the weird kind of thing that I started the journal entry with the pirate joke. And then I looked up the word hilarity. I wrote the word hilarity and I looked that up, and that took it straight back to like this general. I was thinking hilarity would definitely be about things being funny, and fun was like a trick or a joke. But hilarity, of course, will be about being funny. But really, hilarity had this much more softer meaning that like made me cry when I read it. And it didn't have that like, oh, this is a joke, ha ha ha, kind of connotations that I was looking for there. And so I went back to the pirate joke, and I'm like, what? Why is this joke funny? I'm like, why is a pun funny? Like, it drives me nuts. It makes me crazy, or it literally drives the pirates nuts. I'm like, it's hilarious because neither of those meanings, like, they come together. It could be one or the other. You don't know which it is. And the hilarity is in that it has no meaning. It's like non-duality and duality being one together, merging in the like hilarity of the joke itself. And then, as I'm like, the whole point of this journal entry was to try to make myself feel better about like the chaos in my house. And so at some point, my dog must have gotten one of the kids' toy cars. I don't know where it came from. I haven't since found the car or solved this mystery. But at that point, my dog spits out of his mouth a tiny single steering wheel from a toy car. And that is how incredibly enjoyable it can be when you have the right intention to reframe something you're feeling awful about, that you felt awful about for hours, and really start to look at it from all these perspectives and start to be honest about it. And I'm so glad I went there. I'm so glad I hired this crazy person to renovate my house, and I'm so glad I decided to write that crazy journal entry. And so much of this seems crazy, but really, we can't even put a word on it, because then it would have some sort of connotation, and it's way more wonderful than that.